Hello, everybody. Welcome to the APA workshop. It is week 2 of our class. I am Professor Robbins, and you've probably gathered that as you probably watched some of the other orientation videos. You've submitted your personal philosophy. Hopefully, I've gotten back to you on that. I'm so excited to read all of those. It's one of my favorite parts of class, is just getting to know you at the beginning of the course. The reason that I'm adding this APA workshop, I know you're probably ready to just get in it, get down to business. Let's start doing some philosophy stuff. But what I've learned over the past 5 years of teaching this class, especially online, is that sometimes students realize, and often realize too late, that they should have been paying attention to formatting. And APA 7 is not a commonly used format in every field. For example, if you're in biblical studies classes, you might be using SBL. If you're in a history class, you might be using MLA. Also, MLA is the most commonly taught format in high school for literature. So you might be used to using that. You might not be used to using a format at all. And maybe up until this point in your academic career, you haven't been asked to do an official format or a certain format in a class. Let me give you some reasons why I feel like learning APA is a really good practice. For the social sciences, which I know you're going to have to meet your requirements for graduation, almost all social sciences are going to require APA. So if you do any psych, anything like that, you're going to need to use APA. Also in the field of education, APA is the most commonly used. When you're doing things in architecture, you might be using Chicago style, which aligns a little bit more with SBL. It's more of a footnoting style. But the tools that I want to give you in this workshop, although I'm asking you to use APA formatting when you're writing in this class, the tools that I'm going to give you, you could then go and use to figure out any format, okay? So I want to give you today 3 tools to get you started. As you move forward in this class, I'm going to ask you that every single week, whether it's a forum post or it's an assignment that you're turning in directly to me, which, by the way, there'll be a forum post every week, I want you to do a reference section citation and at least 1 to 2 in-text citations. I'm going to tell you what those are today. If you don't know, and if you don't understand what I mean, that's what we're going to go over. We're going to go over in-text citations and reference citations. There are lots of little details to learn along the way, but I want to encourage you to make mistakes, to do your best. It's okay. Just start using this format, start citing what you're doing from the beginning of class so that you, by the end of the class, when you're required to write something that's a little bit longer, not crazy long, but your final in this class is a combination. It's a 4-week project where you pick a philosophical topic and a context of your choice. So it could be architecture, city planning, education, the healthcare field, law enforcement, it could be worship, it could be any of those, where you apply one of the philosophical topics that we've covered in class. And so the last 4 weeks, you are reflecting on your experience in that circumstance, that scenario. You are developing a list of sources you're going to use for your project. You're developing a research paper, and then you're giving a presentation. In those last 4 weeks, all of that combined is your final. So there's no tests in this class, okay? And we really do support you and build up to that point. So kind of think of today as like kind of day 1 of getting you there to be successful during that last 4 weeks. And every single thing that you do to incorporate this format and citation in your work from now until then is just going to help you. It's going to become easier and easier. Let's start with, I think, the most helpful source that I use a lot, although it is very comprehensive and a bit overwhelming, is the Purdue OWL source, okay? So I want to talk to you today about in-text citations and the basics right here on the screen, and then a reference list. Those are the 2 things we're going to cover today. So for those of you who don't know, in-text citations are the citations you're putting within a text that you're writing that are either directly quoting an author or indirectly. So you're paraphrasing or you got the idea from somewhere else. In this class, you're almost always going to be quoting someone else because these ideas are new to you. So our text, for example, Patent and Canon, the cartoon introduction to philosophy, we're going to learn how to do that today together in APA. We're going to use one of these tools to develop a citation for it. And even if you just start practicing using this text, right, in your responses in the coming weeks, that will be a great foundation for then branching out and using other resources. So going back to the basics, we are going to go ahead and look at what an in-text citation looks like. Okay, so in what you need to know about an in-text citation in APA format is the way that it differs from other formatting is that immediately after you mention an author's last name, and we almost always refer to any reference finding the author's name. So if it's like a podcast, you would find the author or the person who published it, their name, the host of the podcast, and you would quote them in text using their last name, okay? And following their last name, always following their last name, you would put the year it was published, whether it was published on the web or a physical copy, whether that's Time Magazine, a journal that's been peer reviewed that is highly academic, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a YouTube video. You will always cite the author or the publisher and the date together. So if you're mentioning that author in the text where it says here as Ahmed mentions or explains, and then you'd say the idea, you see the parenthetical year comes right after the author's name. And then right below that, they give you an option if you don't say the author's name directly, but you're using their idea, right? It's still the same thing, but they're both in the parentheses, and there's a comma in between the author's last name and the date of publication, the year of publication. If it's a short quote or paraphrase, that period comes after the quote. So the period would come at the end there. For a work by two authors, it gives you an example here of how you would do that. So same thing, it's almost identical. Research by Wegener and Petty, and then year of publication, supports. And then here, if we don't say their name outright in the text, Wegener and Petty, and they use this ampersand notice instead of the and written out, comma, and the year of publication. The way that this looks like in a text, let me find the sample paper, is, go all the way up to the beginning. Okay, is this. And this might be hard for you to see. So know that I am going to include this sample paper in your resources this week. But if you can kind of zoom in your screen, wish I could zoom in mine. I wish this was a touch screen. Let me see if it's covering up. I can't at this point. I can't. So according to Thiel, and then in parentheses, we have 2017. And then we have the direct quote. See the quotation mark? And then we have the end quote at the end of the quote. This is less than 3 lines, so it's considered a short quote. And then they have in parentheses at the end of the sentence, P dot space 91. That's the page number, okay? If you didn't want to use the author's name in the text, you could also write all in parentheses, Thiel, comma 2017, comma P dot 91. You could do that at the end of the sentence if you didn't want to mention the author in the text. Okay, so that's an example of what that looks like in context. Okay, because one of the hardest parts when you get started is just developing the citation, even though we've just been talking about like in-text citations, right? The basics and looking at what it means to cite in the text. What I always recommend is when you decide to use a source, go ahead and figure out the reference source, meaning the long version of that citation that you would put at the end of the paper. Now, you're often going to see this. You're often going to see this in MLA as works cited. And then in APA, it's just the only change is it's called references, but it still goes at the end of the work. Now, your work could be a paragraph because in a forum from week to week, I only ask you for 150 words. So you might not have, you know, like a big long paper, and you might only have one thing, which might only be our textbook, right? It might only be this book right here that you're going to cite for that week because that's the only thing that you read. Or you might have one other thing because you want to include a podcast that I provided for you, or you want to talk about an article that I provided for you, or a YouTube video that I provided for you. So it will be common for you to only write a paragraph and still have two references underneath that. Okay. So what I want to show you here is ways that you can, if you develop those references at the end of the text first, and this is what I wanted to show you. This is what they look like. They're the longer version at the end of your text, and it just gives all the information about that publication. It gives the author's last name and first initial, and you'll notice the year of publication, even in the reference, comes right after the author's name. Okay. Then it gives you the title of that work. Notice this is not capitalized the same way we're used to titles being capitalized. However, the journal or magazine or publication source that it comes from, it is capitalized and it is italicized, along with the volume number if it is a journal, and where you find it, the number. This looks like intimidating and it looks so much, but that's why I want to pop over to some generation options. So if you're unclear of how to develop that longer reference at the end of the work, okay, I want to encourage you to use Quillbot. It's a great resource. It's just like any free resource, like you might be using Grammarly, for example. I really like the Quillbot because it mostly works for free. There is a premium upgrade, but I use it for free. And I really, really like the citation generator on Quillbot. If you'll notice this, like I use it, like this is my account and I use this quite a bit. And so you can upload PDFs. If you have the PDF here, you can cite it manually and it will create the citation for you. I just find that it's the most accurate because sometimes even citation generators, they make mistakes. And so let's say there's a podcast that I have you listen to, or our book, you want to create a citation. You would simply put the website that you found that thing in, and you would click cite, and it would develop a citation for you. Another option is using Chat GPT for this very same thing. So let me show you here. I asked Chat GPT, can you generate an, can you find the source information for the book by Patton and Cannon, A Cartoon Introduction to Philosophy? It found it. I saw that this was the right book. I checked. It was accurate. I asked if it could develop a citation for it, and it did. There it is. And in fact, I was going to go ahead and copy that citation. I was going to go over to our class. I was going to put this in edit mode because I'm the teacher and I can do that. I know that you can't. And then I was going to go ahead and get in here, and I was going to provide you with the APA 7 citation. So you'll have an example right off the bat when doing this. And you'll also have, you'll also be able to, sorry, I want to stay in here. You'll also be able to use this citation on your own. So save and return. So now that'll be in there for you. The APA citation will be right there. You know that it is correct. We just did it together and we checked it. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to ChatGPT and just give a little disclaimer. This video is getting a little long, this workshop. So I'm trying to keep this short and sweet for you guys, even though there's just a lot of information here. ChatGPT is a great tool. It is a great resource. I love it. We will talk more about how you can incorporate using it for outlining, for getting thesis ideas. I'm totally okay with you using it. Of course, we don't want it to replace the thinking, right? So in order to use it, you've really got to interact with it. You've got to have the knowledge first, right? And so the way that I'm going to be able to tell that if you're using it without that is if you're just kind of putting in my questions or your prompts. And it will really be really obvious that you didn't have a lot of knowledge that you were putting into ChatGPT to try to understand something more deeply. So I think it would be a great project for someone to do the context of AI and the topic of ethics and philosophy and doing coursework and using AI. I think that would be, nobody's done that in my class yet, but if you do, I would be like, yes, and I would support you because I think it is a great topic to explore. And so that's just a suggestion for you. In part 2 of this workshop, I am going to go through an exercise with you that will be your assignment for this week. So you'll have 2 parts to your tasks for this week. The first will be to upload your completion of the assignment that I'm going to give you for APA. And then the second part will be to post in the forum, which you just pop over to the forum, you read the directions. And if you have any questions, of course, you just email me, text me, whatever. So there's your introduction to in-text citation and references. Again, I know there's a lot of information there, but we're going to get it. We're just going to start practicing and start working on it.